In SQL, raw data by itself, it's really just a bunch of noise. The real magic happens when you turn that noise into actual insight. Today, we're going to dive deep into SQL's aggregation toolkit, starting with the basics of grouping data and going all the way to these advanced functions that can build incredibly complex reports in just one shot. Let's get into it.
So just imagine this. Your boss comes to you and needs a report. They want to see sales totals broken down by region, then by product, and they want the grand total for everything. Now, the old way to do this, you'd be stuck running 3 different queries, trying to match the results together. It's a total mess and so inefficient. But what if you could do all of that in one single elegant query?
Well, that's the exact problem we're going to solve today.
All right, so this is what we're working with, a pretty standard sales data table. Every single row represents one transaction. And yet, it's useful, but it's not insight, right? To actually find the story hidden in this data, we have to start summarizing it.
But before we can even think about aggregating or summarizing our data, we have to make a choice. Which data are we even going to include in our calculations? And that whole process begins with the most fundamental filtering tool in all of SQL.
Okay, I want you to think about your SQL query like it's a data assembly line. The where clause, it's the very first quality control inspector on that line. It looks at every single row, one by one as it comes down the belt, and it just tosses out any row that doesn't meet our rules, long before that data ever gets grouped together.
And this right here brings us to what is maybe the most crucial concept in all of SQL aggregation. And that's the huge difference between filtering individual items as they come down the assembly line versus inspecting the finished package boxes at the very end. You see, this pipeline shows the logical order that SQL thinks in, and this order is absolutely critical. First, where gets rid of the rows we don't want. Then, and only then, does group by come in and bundle the survivors. After that, functions like sum do the math on each bundle, and only at the very end does having show up to inspect the finished bundles themselves. So, here's the bottom line. If you walk away with just one thing, let it be this. Where is for rows, having is for groups. Where acts before the grouping happens, having acts after. It's really that simple.
Next up on our assembly line is the group by clause. This is the station where all the individual items that pass that initial where inspection get sorted into nice, tidy, labeled boxes. All the laptop sales from the North region, they go into one box. All the laptop sales from the South, they go into a different one. It takes many rows and collapses them into one summary row.
Just take a look at this raw data. You can see we've got multiple sales for laptops in the North region, several for monitors out in the West. If we want to understand how we're performing, we can't just stare at this endless list of transactions. We need a summary.
So now, let's see what happens. We're going to apply the group by clause. We're telling SQL, hey, create a unique group for every single region and product combination you find, and then add up the sales for each of those groups. And there it is. Look at that. All of those individual transaction rows are now collapsed into these clean, easy-to-read summary rows. We now have one single line that tells us the total sales for laptops in the North region. That is the power of group by.
Okay, so new request from the boss. Now we only want to see the real high performers, the groups that have total sales over $100,000. So, can we use where to do this? Nope, no way. Why? Because where has no idea what a group total even is. It was way back at the start of the assembly line. We need a different tool for this job.
And that tool is having. This is our final inspector, standing at the very end of the line. It looks at our finished, summarized boxes, our groups, and it checks if their total value meets our condition. It filters based on the result of our aggregate functions, like that sum sales.
All right, now that we've totally nailed the fundamentals of filtering rows versus filtering groups, it's time to bring out the heavy machinery. We're going to move beyond these simple summaries and start building complex, multi-level reports with just a fraction of the code you'd expect.
First up is grouping sets. Think of this as the Swiss Army knife of aggregation. It lets you define a totally custom list of summaries you want, all in one query. So you could get totals by region and, completely separately, totals by product category. It's basically the same as writing 2 different queries and then trying to staple them together with a union, but it's way more efficient and so much easier to read.
Next, we have ROLLUP. Now, this tool is a specialist. It's designed for one very specific job, creating hierarchical reports.
Like when you drill down in a sales report, you want to see the grand total for everything, then you want to see totals by region, and then totals for each product inside that region. ROLLUP does exactly that, and it does it automatically.
And just look at how ROLLUP builds this report for you. It gives you 3 levels of data right out of the box. First, you get the most detailed view, sales by both region and product. Then it rolls up to give you the subtotal for just each region. And finally, it rolls all the way up to give you that grand total for absolutely everything, which you can spot by the nulls in both of the grouping columns.
And finally, the ultimate power tool, Cube. Where ROLLUP is all about hierarchy, Cube is multidimensional. It literally gives you every possible combination of subtotals. And here's why that's a total game changer. It's perfect for building pivot tables directly in your database. No more exporting these massive raw data sets into Excel. You do all the heavy lifting right where the data lives. And the power here just grows exponentially. If you use Cube with just 3 columns, say region, product, and category, it doesn't just give you 3 summaries. No. It generates 2 to the power of 3, which is 8 distinct grouping levels all in one go. That is a staggering amount of analytical power from a single command. So, with all these amazing options, how in the world do you know which one to pick?
Well, it all just comes down to the kind of report you're trying to build.
So here's your decision-making guide. If your boss asks for 2 totally unrelated totals, like give me total sales by region and also total sales by product category, that's a job for grouping sets. If they want one of those classic drill-down reports, from country to state to city, that is exactly what ROLLUP was built for. And if they just say, give me everything so I can slice and dice it myself, that's your cue to use Cube and give them a full, multi-dimensional analysis.
So there you have it. You've just gone from simple filtering to building these incredibly complex, multi-level analytical reports, and you can do it all inside a single, elegant query.
All right, let's do a super quick lightning round recap. Where filters rows, group by makes the groups, having filters those finished groups. For the advanced reports, grouping sets gives you custom combinations, ROLLUP builds those neat hierarchies, and Cube just gives you everything. You now have a complete toolkit to summarize data in pretty much any way you can imagine. So the next time you're looking at a mountain of raw data, don't just see a bunch of numbers. See the potential for a powerful, multi-level report that you can build in a single query. So what hidden trends are you going to uncover? Go find out.